Hey guys, how you doing? Um, I often get asked questions relating to self-protection as it comes with an art bias. So, what art should I do? What art is the best? This, that, and the other. And really and truly, there's no right answer, but there are wrong answers. For me, and for my personal stance on things, it's always been about the training methodology. I've said this many, many times. If you train yourself under pressure, you will be able to manifest that under pressure so much easier. If you don't train under pressure, you won't be able to manifest it under pressure easier. Relatively straightforward concept and principle. With that being said, there are certain areas that you need to be able to cover off on in your arts. We're leaving out the legal, ethical, moral considerations because that isn't covered within an art. That's a much larger sphere of self-defense. In fact, it's the more important part of self-defense, but it isn't covered in most arts as a general rule. First and foremost, you want to have one which is a bread and butter art. That's going to be your foundation piece that everything else gets plugged into. For me, I'm a big fan of boxing. You could equally use Muay Thai. You could use Jiu-Jitsu. You could use wrestling. You could use Judo. Anything that has a heavy pressure testing component to that. Some people these days would say MMA. That works. The problem with MMA as a rule is if you just do MMA, you get okay at bits. Nothing's ever like, your go-to that you're really, really good at. And for me, especially when it comes to self-protection, you need to have a limited number of options that you can deliver very, very quickly and very, very effectively. It's for this reason I recommend boxing as the king of these sports for doing that sort of thing. But wrestling, jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, they're all equally valid. The second thing you want to do is add one of the support art. So if your first art is boxing, I would suggest adding a grappling art to it. Jiu-jitsu, wrestling, judo again. If your first art is jiu-jitsu, then add a striking art to it, the Muay Thai or the boxing. Essentially, you have a pro to MMA construction here. But what you also have is systems that are designed to perform under resistance, under someone trying to assert their dominance and will on you, and you stop that and try and assert yours back. Essentially, that's the physical part of most self-defense situations. Third stage to this isn't weapons, which is what surprises most people. It's inserting the little spices and pickles. So that would be, the bites, the eye gouges, the pokes in the eyes, the kicks in the dicks, and all that sort of thing too as well. In and of themselves, these are not going to end the fight for you. You need a delivery system. That's why we have to have those pressure tested systems, like the boxing, like the wrestling, like whatever else it happens to be. So once you have a solid delivery system in place, hopefully supported by another one, then you can insert the cheats because you need to know the rules before you can break them. If you can't deliver a decent jab, you ain't delivering an eye jab properly either because the mechanics are not that far apart from each other, and it's the distance, the timing, the experience, and all those things that go along with helping that deliver come in. Does that mean you can't poke someone in the eyes if you haven't done boxing? No, of course it doesn't. You can do pretty much anything to anyone if you catch them napping. What we're talking about is maximizing our chances of success in a high stress, high pressure situation. Never gauge your training to the lowest denominator. Always try to envision the worst case scenario and come up with the solutions that you can for that. Once you've done all this, then you consider doing something like weapons-based training. Now, obviously, I'm a Filipino martial arts practitioner, Serrada Eskrima, under Grandmaster Darren T-Bone. There are lots of other systems out there. I found none that fit me as well as that, so of course I'm going to be biased in my recommendation. Again, I would avoid so-called generalist style systems because the problem with these is they don't really solve anything well. So a lot of people will look to military-based systems. I'll use Krav Maga as an example of that. Sometimes people will train in military or special forces and things. The problem with this is it doesn't translate well to a civilian market. One of the reasons military unarmed combat isn't that good is they're very rarely unarmed. So you're just going to get something to fill it in until you can get to your gun, your knife, and kill someone. We don't have those same operating paradigms in a civilian life, unless you live in a very bad neighborhood. So taking a military system, not always a good idea. Even when you take a weapons-based system, like a Filipino martial arts, like Serrada, for example, you still need context behind that. And the reason I like Serrada is it's a very elegant, simple Filipino martial arts system. There's not an awful lot of fluff and flush to it, but there's a lot of levels and complications to it. So it's an art that stays with you for life. If you have a decent delivery system, you plug in some dirty tricks, and then you learn a little bit of weapons manipulation, you've probably got a pretty good recipe there purely for the physical aspects. And I have to stress that this does not give you a comprehensive self-defense package. You're still going to need to go through your own moral framework. You're still going to go to the legal aspects of things like that as well. You're still going to have to go through avoidance, de-escalation skills, and a lot of the soft tactics. Most people out there will say, you know, that sort of stuff doesn't really work. I believe you, you're clearly bad at it, but it works all the time. We de-escalate constantly in the day without really realizing it, because if we're not getting into a fight every time we have a disagreement with someone, we're de-escalating to an extent. All we have to do is make sure that we capitalize on those opportunities and recognize them, so we can de-escalate something that has a potential to become physical. But if we can actually go in with an attitude of we just want to walk away from this rather than I'm going to end you, then de-escalation presents itself more often. When the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem starts to look like a nail. That being said, there are times when you're going to need a hammer, and that's why you have to have a consistent delivery system, spice it up with a little bit of dirty tricks, throw a little bit of weapon work in there, and you're probably going to cover all your bases. If you have a more esoteric based system, pick one at random, doesn't matter, there's a million of them out there, Wing Chun, Aikido, Kung Fu, Karate, no one cares. As long as you're pressure testing that and can manifest it under pressure, there is no reason that can't work for you either. The reason I select the systems I select is because they're very, very quick learning curves. You can get competent in them very quickly, and the pressure testing is inherent. Most of the other arts, you need to get the skill set and the base in that art before you can then pressure test it. It's a much longer endeavor. Now, of course, if you've got the time to invest in that, not a problem, go for it. I know I certainly practice some classical styles and systems, but that's more for my own development rather than my self-protection piece. For me, a good 1-2, maybe a 3 coming over the top and stick a cheeky nodder down the middle, a lot of my striking's handled there. For the grappling piece, a quick snoozy, most of that's handled too. Do I have most of my arsenal? Of course I do, but it's the bread and butter. You need to get good at a handful of things that you can deliver consistently under pressure. That's going to get you through a lot of the situations. If you have to pick 1 or 2 things, pick something that's going to be with your hands, like a good strike, a good jab, a good cross, a good slap, whatever it happens to be, because that's going to afford you the opportunity to take that one hit and then get out of that situation. Those are my thoughts on it, guys. As always, your comments and queries are welcome below. And remember, this is just a very skim on the surface. There's a lot more detail we can go into, and if there's interest out there, I will do. Take care, guys. See you in the next one.